Imagine waking up one day and being told that there are now three presidents of your country. All three are claiming to be the only legitimate one. All three have armies, governments, and supporters behind them, and nobody knows which one to obey. That is almost exactly what happened to the Catholic Church in the late 1300s. For nearly 4 decades, the most powerful religious institution in the world was torn apart by a crisis so absurd, so chaotic, and so deeply human that it is almost hard to believe it actually happened. This is the story of the Great Western Schism. To understand why the Church ended up with 3 popes, you have to go back even further, to a period historians call the Babylonian captivity of the Church. In 1309, Pope Clement V made a shocking decision. He moved the entire papal court out of Rome and relocated it to Avignon, in the south of what is now France. Rome had become dangerous. Italian noble families were constantly fighting for influence over the papacy, and the city itself was politically unstable. Avignon offered something Rome could not: safety and order. The French crown was powerful, and having the Pope nearby was very much in their interest. But here is the problem. The Pope living in France, under the shadow of the French king, did not look good. It looked like the papacy had been captured, like the Church was now a political tool of the French monarchy. Critics across Europe were furious. Rome, the city of St. Peter, the city where the Church was born, had been abandoned. For 67 years, 7 consecutive popes ruled from Avignon. All 7 were French. The College of Cardinals became dominated by French cardinals. The papacy, in the eyes of much of Europe, had become a French institution. By the 1370s, pressure to return to Rome had become impossible to ignore. Mystics, theologians, and ordinary Christians across Europe were demanding it. Among the loudest voices was a young Dominican nun from Siena named Catherine. She wrote directly to Pope Gregory XI, calling him out with remarkable boldness, urging him to be a man of courage and return the Church to its rightful home. Gregory XI listened. In 1377, after decades of French popes ruling from Avignon, Gregory XI packed up the papal court and made the long journey back to Rome. It was a historic moment. The Romans celebrated. The city that had felt abandoned by its own church finally had its pope back. But the celebrations did not last long. Gregory XI found Rome chaotic, dirty, and far harder to govern than Avignon. He reportedly considered going back. And then, in March 1378, before he could do anything, he died. Gregory's death triggered a crisis that nobody was prepared for. The cardinals gathered in Rome to elect a new pope, but the Roman crowd was not going to let this moment pass quietly. Thousands of people surrounded the building where the cardinals were meeting, chanting and screaming. They wanted a Roman pope, or at least an Italian one. They were not going to let the papacy slip back to France. The cardinals, genuinely fearing for their lives, rushed the election. They chose an Italian, Bartolomeo Prignano, the Archbishop of Bari. He took the name Urban VI. At first, everyone accepted the result. Urban VI was recognized by the cardinals, by foreign rulers, and by the Church at large. Then Urban VI opened his mouth. The man turned out to be erratic, aggressive, and verbally abusive. He screamed at cardinals during meetings. He insulted ambassadors. He accused senior churchmen of corruption in the most humiliating public ways. Within weeks, the cardinals who had elected him began to regret their decision deeply. The French cardinals saw their opportunity. They quietly slipped out of Rome and regrouped. Then they made a stunning announcement. The election of Urban VI, they declared, had been invalid. It had been conducted under duress, under the threat of mob violence. Therefore, it did not count. Urban VI was not the real pope. And then they elected one of their own, Robert of Geneva, a French cardinal who took the name Clement VII. He immediately set up court in Avignon. Now there were 2 popes, Urban VI in Rome, recognized by England, the Holy Roman Empire, Hungary, and most of Italy. Clement VII in Avignon, recognized by France, Scotland, Castile, and Aragon. Europe split almost perfectly along political lines. If you were an enemy of France, you backed Rome. If you were an ally of France, you backed Avignon. The schism was as much political as it was religious. Both popes excommunicated each other. Both declared the other to be the Antichrist. Both claimed to be the only true successor of St. Peter, and both continued to appoint cardinals, run the church, and collect taxes from their respective followers. When Urban VI died in 1389, his cardinals elected a successor, Boniface IX. When Clement VII died in 1394, his cardinals elected Benedict XIII. The two lines continued, each one refusing to give an inch. By the early 1400s, the schism had been going on for over 20 years. The church was exhausted. Christians across Europe were confused, demoralized, and angry. How could the institution that claimed to be the one true church be so visibly, so embarrassingly broken? A growing movement within the church argued that a general council, a gathering of bishops, cardinals, and theologians, had the authority to override the pope and resolve the crisis. This idea was called conciliarism, and in 1409, cardinals from both the Roman and Avignon sides secretly met and agreed to convene a council in Pisa. It was a bold move. They declared both sitting popes, Gregory XII in Rome and Benedict XIII in Avignon, to be schismatics and heretics. Both were deposed, and a new pope was elected, Alexander V. The plan was reasonable in theory. In practice, it was a disaster. Neither Gregory XII nor Benedict XIII accepted the council's authority. Neither stepped down. Both continued to rule, continued to claim legitimacy, and continued to have supporters. The church now had 3 popes simultaneously. Alexander V died just 10 months after his election and was succeeded by John XXIII, a man so corrupt and scandalous that centuries later, when a new John XXIII was elected in 1958, the Vatican had to clarify that the numbering was being reset because the original one was not considered legitimate. The 3-pope situation could not continue. Something had to give. In 1414, the Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund pushed for a new council, this time in Constance in modern-day Germany. The Council of Constance became one of the most significant gatherings in the history of the Church. The council operated on a radical principle. Every nation got a vote, not every cardinal. This diluted the power of the French and Italian blocs and gave the process genuine legitimacy in the eyes of Europe. One by one, the 3 lines were dealt with. John XXIII, the Pisan Pope, was put on trial. The charges against him were staggering: corruption, simony, immorality, and worse. He fled the council in disguise, but was eventually captured and deposed. Gregory XII, the Roman Pope, negotiated a face-saving exit. He was allowed to formally convene the council himself, a symbolic gesture that let him pretend he was acting voluntarily, and then resigned. He died shortly after, an old man stripped of everything. Benedict XIII, the Avignon Pope, refused to budge. He retreated to a castle in Spain and continued to claim he was the true pope until his death in 1423. His tiny band of followers elected 2 more successors after him, a line that technically continued in obscurity for decades. In 1417, with the 3 competing lines finally cleared away, the Council of Constance elected a new pope, Martin V. The schism was over. The Great Western Schism lasted 39 years. It produced 3 simultaneous popes, 2 rival courts, and a crisis of legitimacy that shook Christianity to its core. But its effects went far beyond the chaos itself. The schism permanently weakened the moral authority of the papacy. It showed the world that the church was a human institution, capable of the same political dysfunction, ego, and corruption as any kingdom or empire. It planted seeds of doubt that would grow for another century, until a German monk named Martin Luther nailed his grievances to a church door and changed the world forever. The Great Western Schism did not cause the Reformation, but it made it possible. If you found this story fascinating, subscribe. There are plenty more where this came from.